right, turn 6 is done here at the Hilltop Pillbox in Abbotsford, British Columbia, Canada, and I know you're all wondering what's happening in South Africa. Nah, you want to know what happened up in Moscow. Well, that's what happened up in Moscow. And it was actually really close until the last 2 rounds, and the Russian dice went ice cold. Now, they beat up a lot of Germans. There were a lot more Russians than Germans there, but most of them were infantry. And they punched pretty hard. Now, Leningrad still has a lot in there. Like Karelia, they burned the factory and moved everybody into Leningrad. I don't think that's going to fall anytime soon. And although the German tanks are free to scamper around, Stalingrad also remains in their hands, and they've got factories in both of those places. So this is not done by any stretch at all. The Germans have to be very careful, actually, because they don't have much of a follow-up down here. They've spent a lot of time, money, and energy now bulking up here in the center and here in the west because, well, look at this. This is getting out of hand. All right, the British now have, including Canadian transports, now have 8 transports, so they get a little bonus, I think a +3 bonus for that. The Americans have transports here. They just shucked over another 12 units. But here we go. Here we now have 9 transports, I believe. Is it 9 or 10? It's 9. 9 transports filled. And, of course, these guys will come back next turn. So they've got the shuck going now. And they're going to have to make a landing in one of these turns, and then the shucking will stop. So they want to make sure they've got enough stuff to land that they know they can stay. Now the Germans did get the Soviet cash this last turn, some $43, I believe, 43 or 44. So they're going to be loading up with a bunch of mobile and agile and hostile units here in Germany proper. Because the last thing they want to do is win the battle over here, but then lose the war. So, you have to be careful. Plus, Italy is mucho thin here. And the Italians decided to bulk up their navy, built 3 destroyers down here, and sailed the whole fleet down. Now, the British now have 6 submarines here. And they have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 aircraft that can assault this. So the question remains, do they feel like they want to go all in at this point and try to take out the Italian fleet that has just been rebuilt? So the Italians have 6 destroyers that match up well with the 6 subs, and then they also have a sub, a cruiser, a battleship, and 2 transports that defend at a 1. Meanwhile, the British have a ferry swordfish. You can see him tucked down in there. They got a couple of hurricanes and a couple of mosquitoes, and then of course you got your Lancaster. So these are the tough choices that war sometimes forces upon people. And when they make the right choice, they look like geniuses, and when they make the wrong choice, they look like Montgomery. All right, over here, the British, speaking of Montgomery, have been able to take over all of the Middle Eastern territories. They give them a +5 bonus. So that's good for them. So they get the 5 from the territories +5 for the NO. I believe it's 5. So that's a 10 IPP play right there. Good for them. Japanese have taken over every inch of India now, defeating a Gurkha here, but losing one of their SNLF in the process. The Money Islands are almost entirely in Japanese hands. They still need this one here. Just didn't have enough transports to drag guys around to take Celebes this turn, so they're going to have to look at that. Anzac saved its money. Built a fighter last round, but saved its money this round. There is no real threat, so they're going to save the money, and depending on what the Japanese fleets do, fleets plural, they will build accordingly. So it'll either be a defensive hunker in the bunker or start building something to reach out and start nibbling away at the Japanese economy. So here we have this Japanese fleet. That's this one here. It's rather diminutive compared to their others. It's just got 1 transport in there, has 3 cruisers and a couple of destroyers, but a loaded carrier. And then we have here at Wake, which the Japanese decided to liberate. They've got a larger fleet. That's this one here. Got a two battle wagons, and a couple of escort carriers, 5 destroyers, and 1 transport. And then this is the real nuisance right here, but it's a little out of position right now, so we're going to have to decide what to do with this. So we've got a Yamato class battleship, Kyushu, and I know sometimes the names don't match up with what we've given them as far as power goes. The Musashi, of course, is the sister ship of the Yamato, but we're going to make the Kyushu a Yamato class here. I can't even remember if it was a Yamato class. It sure could have been. And then we've got 3 fully loaded carriers and a cruiser, and then a couple of subs causing nuisance for the Americans right there. And back home, it's just a whole whack of transports and a cruiser and a destroyer pulling escort duty there. But what's going on over here on the mainland? Well, I'm glad you asked. Well, the Chinese continue to build. They just continue to build, and they took back Hong Kong this turn, but they have vacated the coastal areas, except for Shantung, because look at that. Peking is now in the commies' hands. Yes, and all of the Japanese veteran infantry have been eliminated, plus the Siamese fighter, plus the other build that was there. They had 12 units there, and the commies came in, the communist Chinese as well as the Soviet Union, and they really put paid to that whole late war attack that they did on Japan. They did really well. And they lost a bunch, of course, but not as much as the Japanese ended up losing. Shanghai, is likely not going to be touched anytime soon. That's why the Chinese backed off. I did have that one stack in Shantung, and a cavalry could make it, and a fighter, but this was just a little too tough. I thought that would just be throwing the game away for China. If you can keep China relevant, that'll make Japan continually look over her shoulder, and that's the whole point, right? That's the whole point. Make Japan look over their shoulder. All right, so that is pretty much it. The Axis have done very well here in the Pacific. Not as well on the mainland. They're suffering. If we look at the territories they actually own, they own Shanghai, and then everything down south. Everything else has been taken over by the Allies. And if we look at Africa, everything but Tobruk has been taken over by the Allies. So the Allies are pretty strong in a couple of areas. They did lose Moscow, but like I said, Stalingrad and Leningrad are not looking like they're definitely not going to fall this turn because there's no can opener. Oh, and the Crimea. Yes, there was a partisan in there, and I sent in a lone infantry just to deal with it. And first round he lost. The partisan killed him. So, makes for some entertaining stuff. So, the lone infantrymen there pulling in a buck for the Soviet cause. And it's a free infantryman, of course, right? Because 2 partisans create the infantry and you don't have to pay for the partisans. That's all gravy for the Soviets. But the Germans, very, very tough in the interior here, building up lots of tanks. We've got some Hummel self-propelled artillery back there. That's the most I can have in the game, so I just built the whole thing. But with all of these troops ready to come ashore, I think we're going to see D-Day this turn. Not exactly sure where it's going to happen. Could be Normandy, could be Reims or Reims, or could be Bordeaux. Not exactly entirely sure. For my part, I think Bordeaux is probably the best place to land, in that if you can fix the port, it's then 3 steps back to, I ain't going to get this straight shot going, because if you take Normandy, the port for Normandy is attached to the English Channel, and that's 4 away, so you wouldn't be able to get back and forth. So I think Bordeaux is the place to go. And the Germans know that, because I'm the Germans. But there's not a lot I can do about it right now. I think the Allies are going to be firmly entrenched here at the end of next round. But we will have to wait and see if that's exactly what happens. Very interesting game, though. Very interesting, and it is not over by a long shot. And the Americans continue to build these pesky little sub chasers and subs. They're just building the cheap stuff over here right now because they're maxing out their build on the Atlantic side with cheap transports at $6 and the men and artillery at 7, so it's $13. And yeah, they're able to build, 6 of those only cost $78. So then the remainder goes over here, and they will continue to pump out these pesky little things. Could become a problem for the Japanese. It really could. I know they've got a monster fleets here, but it's going to take them a while to marshal them all together and pose a threat. And by then, there might be so much cannon fodder for the Americans that it's just not worth it for the Japanese to head over there and start a fight. So, it'll be interesting to see where it goes. Thanks so much for watching, folks. And keep in mind the Northern Lights tournament coming here in August, 18th to 21st. I'm going to just keep pumping it and doing some propaganda. And you can, what did you do when the Northern Lights tournament was on, Daddy? That kind of thing, right? So, but we're looking forward to it. Gargantua could be dropping by. He's interested in coming. He really likes playing a couple of those games, so we're going to get him in on it. And he only lives a little ways away, and he's hoping to be here. So Gargantua, Triple Crown, maybe Sky Marshal, maybe General Hand Grenade. Some big names in Axis and Allies and HBG YouTube world coming here. I'm working on some of my American friends, but it's a bit of a walk for them to get up here, and summers are always very, very spoken for. I know they're sacred. We're going to try it this year in the summer, and then next year we might be moving it. But for this year, August 18th to 21st, come on up to Abbotsford, and make sure, folks, that when you play these games, you hug your loved ones and thank them for letting you spend time, money, and energy on a great hobby like this. Thank your friends for playing with you. And as always, may those pesky dice be with you.